One of the most frequent questions I get early on in the semester is, how do I get my own domain? Um, and domain names, it makes sense. People like to name things, and they want to lay claim to domain names. Um, First, you have to make sure that the domain name isn't already taken, and frankly, most common dictionary words and lots of combinations of uncommon dictionary words are already taken. And so this results in very strange web company names of people trying to hit on a name that hasn't been used before. Generally speaking, there's still cachet behind the .com name. There are what are called top-level names. For example, TLDs, top-level domain names. So, for example, there is the three-letter domain names, things like .com, .org, and .net. And then there are a lot of CC TLDs, country code TLDs, including things like .uk for the UK or .jp for Japan. Each of these top-level domains has a separate set of rules. For example, you can't just go out and on your own decide to start your own .gov or your own .edu. You need to match the requirements of the particular domain registrar. However, many registrars are open. So, for example, we have the site for this class is www.ti.me, which is an unusual one. It's fine for something like this. Again, generally there's more cachet behind the .com because that's where people are more likely to look first. So how do you get one of these? Back in the old days, there was one place you could get it, and you got it for free. Then they started charging, and then eventually they started licensing other people to sell domain names and registrars who are able to keep a registration of a domain name. What does it mean when you buy a domain name? Basically, all it is the equivalent of listing your telephone number in a directory. You still need to have a host. The web host and the domain service are completely different things. They don't have to be. In many cases, web hosts will also sell you a domain name, but generally speaking, those are two things that don't have to go together. So your domain name listing is something that is equivalent to a listing in the white pages. What it says is this domain name is linked to this particular internet address, IP address. So, for example, we can discover what our own IP address is by going to a service and typing in, what IP am I at? And you can do some other things to figure out what IP addresses are. But your web host will give you some kind of an IP address for your website. And you could make everybody come to your IP address, which is a 4 numbers, 0 to 255 in each case. So you could say, come to my come to my website at 192.168.5.4. But that would be really hard to remember. Just like nowadays, you aren't actually expected to remember telephone numbers. You've associated them with names, and so the DNS system allows you to make it a little bit more user friendly and associate your domain with a name. Once you have a domain like, for example, halivay.net, you also have control of the secondary domains, the subdomains that are part of that. So, for example, if I have halivay.net, I don't have to pay extra to then have alex.halivay.net or bob.halivay.net. All of the things that come before the domain name, I get to keep and control. Now, how your hosting service gets you access to those, then it can get a little bit muddy and complicated, but more and more you can pretty much easily get access to the subdomains as well, and be able to put sites up for that. Where do you go for it? Well, again, I'm not in the business of advertising. I've bought domains through DreamHost. I've bought domains through GoDaddy, through Namecheap, and a number of other places through Gaudi.net. All of these are fine choices. I'd say go out and read some forums and decide which is best. Luckily, they're competing with one another, so some of them can be very inexpensive. Some of them have varying degrees of service. Remember that you don't have to buy. Many people, when they're getting started with this, will go to GoDaddy and buy an inexpensive domain and then end up paying quite a bit for GoDaddy to host their domain, even though, or buy other random extras that you don't really need. there isn't a lot of money in selling domain names because it's such a cutthroat business, which is good for us and bad for the registrars. But don't get tricked into buying the extra stuff. You don't need undercoding for your domain name. Just buy the domain name and set it up pointing to a server. When you're starting out, it may just be easier to buy the domain name through your hosting, your web host. Often they aren't marking it up by very much, and that way you know right away that it will be hooked up and you don't have to worry about issues of where you're going to put your name servers and that sort of thing. If you're interested in more details on this, I only want to touch on it lightly here, but there's lots more to learn about how to set up a domain, and I'll put some links on the page to more information about how to get started with that. All right, so there's a quick touch on how to become master of your own domain, and I will see you next time.